Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Shine a Light On series. Today, we'll be shining a light on how to tell your story with Marie Ablaza. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, of course. Happy to have you here. And to start, do you mind just giving us a brief introduction to who you are and please tell us a bit about Fairy Job Mother?
Sure. Yes, a little bit about me. Yes, I'm Marie Ablaza. I'm currently a talent acquisition specialist at Ubisoft. Prior to Ubisoft, I worked in the entertainment industry. I worked at Lucasfilm, which is part of the Walt Disney Company. And I've always been in recruiting. That's always been my career track ever since I graduated from college. And about the Fairy Job Mother, it's really just my passion of being a recruiter and just really my personality. Anyone who knows me personally knows I'm super bubbly and I'm a huge Disney fan. You know, people always say like whenever I'm around, it's like I'm sprinkling fairy dust all over the place. But really, it's just my optimism and my personality. And so I kind of combine that with my passion of being a recruiter. I always wanted to be a recruiter, and so I really love this space. And so I kind of combine this persona together, and now call myself a fairy job mother, where it's really like I just have a lot of optimism and love and passion for being a recruiter and just getting people to being in their dream companies and their dream jobs.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I love that we're chatting about this topic today. Of course, I think this is so important. And honestly, I'm sure you agree. That's why you're here. I think our stories are the most unique thing about us. They keep us original, they keep us different from others, and no matter how many similarities we have with someone. So, from your perspective, what is so important about knowing how to tell your story?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you really just started it off. Like, stories is how we communicate. You know, it really is how we connect with people. It's how we relay our experiences. It's a way to entertain and intrigue and, have people really understand who we are. You know, it is personal. And we're able to really just tell people what we've been through, what we're about, what our values are, what's important to us, what makes us tick, what makes us angry, what makes us cry, and things like that. And so it really is just a powerful connector. But my favorite thing about storytelling too is stories can teach things. Stories can change people. And that's the stuff that, for me, like why I feel like storytelling is just so important, because sometimes you just feel like you're just on an adventure, right? Like if you think about your favorite stories, you think about the hero of your favorite movie and like how that whole storyline goes. But at the end of the story, there's like a moral, right? Like there's something that's being taught, there's something that changes in you, and you're like, wow, I never seen or would think of that perspective. And so really, like, that's what I feel like is really important about storytelling, is that it's not just a way to entertain and connect, but you can entertain, connect, but also reach people in a way that you can teach them and really change their lives.
Yes, great answer. Thank you for that. And I do think that more companies too are starting to realize the power in storytelling when they try to tell
Absolutely.
people about like their products too, not even like a human level, but a business level too.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so many stories that are being told. I mean, think about your favorite brand, right? Like
Hmm.
for me, it's like Disney. I mean, of course, they're like huge with storytelling, but even when it comes to like particular products, like that company or organization is putting out a story. And so that's why you, as a consumer, want to engage with it, right? Like whatever your
Hmm.
favorite product is, Apple or whatever, you think about it and you're like, why am I really engaging? And it's because they've put out some type of story that's captured you, and they've brought you along with them. Like you're now kind of like a character in this whole like story world, but really you're just part of a brand now. So an interesting
Yes.
way to look at
Yeah.
it.
So, how do you relate storytelling to networking? Because I think storytelling is a much nicer way to say that. Like, it sounds so much more appealing, and networking kind of has a scary connotation to it. So, are they the same? Are they different? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely use storytelling when you're networking. I think when people think networking, yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me sometimes is like, your elevator pitch, right? Like you're just meeting someone, you've got a minute to like let them know like who you are. And that piece is intimidating, but not only that, I've been in recruitment for 7 years, and elevator pitches sometimes just feel so robotic. Like I don't feel like I'm really connecting. And that's just my honest, experience. Like sometimes I just don't connect with people when they're giving me their elevator pitch. And so how I connect storytelling to networking is really your your story is just an elevated elevator pitch, in the sense of that it really is just your more of your authentic voice, because really when you're thinking about your elevator pitch, you feel so siloed, like I need to tell them who I am, this is what I do, this is what I want, and then kind of end, and it's a little bit awkward because you're not really sure how that person will respond. But again, thinking about storytelling as a connector, that's what networking is about. So, really, when you're networking, I would much rather hear your story, like who you are, where you've come from, what are some things in your life that have gotten you here at this very moment. What are goals that you are chasing? What's making you tick? What are you being intentional about in your life or your career? And when you think about those things, that's when really the authentic person starts coming out, because you start getting excited, right? Like if I were to ask you, tell me what your favorite thing is in the world, you would probably just go, oh my God, I can tell you all about X, Y, and Z, and go on and on and on. That's how storytelling should feel. It should feel exciting to you. It should feel like you can just continue forever on it, like you're really excited. And so when you're networking with people, I feel like that's a connector. Like I want to see people and know what makes them tick. Like when I talk to someone and they go on and off about what they're passionate about, and it's in their eyes, it's in their voice, it's in their body language, like they just can't help but just spew things out. Like that's the real person. Like that's who I'm really meeting, not the elevator pitch person. You know what I mean? So really, when it comes to that networking piece, yeah, I stray away from really that the elevator pitch, and I really just want to know like who really are you? What are those things that you're going through right now? Your highs and lows, your wins and losses that have gotten you here today and have created the person that's standing right in front of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I love all these points. Thank you for that. And I definitely agree that you can't fake authenticity. There's no template for authenticity in terms of you say this first and then this next and then that next. That's just, it's not how it works. And I agree with you that if you're passionate about a story you're telling, ideally you would be, if you're talking about your own interests or experiences, then it should come off authentically and not like a robot. And I've been there before. I know what you mean. Um, I've seen it, and I think I have attempted to be that robot before too, and it's just not worth it in the end. So I
Totally.
I
Yeah, I
appreciate you
feel like
sharing
the
that.
best way that I've heard about what does it really mean to be authentic is think about your favorite pair of jeans, your favorite shirt, and how you just slip it on and you feel it doesn't matter what you're doing that day, you can go to Walmart in that outfit and feel amazing. That's what authenticity feels like. That no matter where you are, no matter who you're with, no matter what you're saying, it's you, and no one can change your mind about it. No one can tell you that you look bad in those jeans. You're like, I don't care. That's me. That's what I want to wear today and I feel good. That's what authenticity feels like. And that's what your
Totally.
story should feel like, that you can put it on like a shirt and feel like that's me 100%.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I love that metaphor. Alrighty. In what sort of scenarios do you find yourself telling your story most often? Or from your experiences, when might students do the same?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, because I'm a recruiter, um I really am able to tell like really my career path. That's just in the recruiting space. Like I'm always talking about like how did I get to where I am now, and what are those experiences in my life and those turning points in my life that got me to be a recruiter. People ask me like, why do you want to be a recruiter, or why are you so passionate about this space? What about it makes you tick? And that's really where I feel like I'm sharing my story. But the thing about stories, that sometimes I feel people get confused about is that they think there's only one story you need to tell all over, or over time and time and again. But really, you're made up of stories, you know, like your sources of your stories can come from anywhere. So for me, a lot of my stories come from just like my professional career, you know, what I like, what's important to me as a recruiter. What are some significant events that have shaped my career? But when you think about students, you know, whether you have a professional career or not, there's other places that your stories can come from. You know, the people around you, who are your mentors, who are your professors, who are your friends that are lifting you up or lifting you down, you know, in terms of your career. What are significant occurrences that affected you, you know, as a kid, where you live, you're as an adult now, you know, what are those life changing moments? Your values, you know, like what is it that you are living by? What actions do you do that you feel proud of? And what are actions that you do that make you feel guilty? You know, like everything that you do day to day, you know, are based on the decisions you make based on your values. And so, really, there's stories that come from different places. And so, as a student, you could be telling your story really anywhere. You know, you're telling stories with your friends, you're telling stories with your professors. When you get to those interviews, right? Like that's really where storytelling can really make an impact because again, going back to that whole like robotic thing, like that's your chance to really shine and show these employers who you really are. Why do you want this internship or this role or whatever it is that you're applying into? Um, but there's so many moments that you can you know, exercise storytelling, and really it just happens on the fly, right? You're just hanging out with friends and you're talking about something you saw on TV or something you saw in person. Like that's already active storytelling. But real true storytelling does come when you start kind of like thinking about it, diluting it, distilling it, and then putting a structure behind it. So really anytime you know, is a good time to be storytelling, and you'll find those moments, you know, as you just kind of journey through your life anyways.
Yes, I definitely agree. I think most dialogue could be storytelling.
Yes,
It might be informal, but I do agree with you in that if you sort of like intrigue people, you pull them in, you entice them to want to know more, then like you're doing something right. You're telling the story well, whether it's an interview or a conversation with a friend.
exactly. And good storytelling too is when something like calls to action, right? Like, or when you
Yes.
like, have you ever like been in a position where you're talking with your friends and then all of a sudden you ask an action question at the end and they're like, yeah, let's go, let's do it. I mean, even like when you and I met and you're like, hey, you know, do you want to do this podcast? Like, yeah, let's do it. You know, like
Right.
that's kind of like the start of storytelling too. But when there's actions involved as well, you know, that really starts becoming like as an important part of like the whole storytelling structure too, because now not only have you intrigued them, you've kind of gotten them in your bubble, they're really interested in your story and what you're doing, and then when there's that call to action later, that's really what sticks with people.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree. I think this goes back to why businesses use storytelling because they pull your heartstrings, they get you excited about something, they entice you, and then there's that call to action. And at that point, if it's a good story, then you're like, why wouldn't I buy this product right now? So, yes, cool. No, thank you so much for sharing. And I am curious, especially in this day and age, how might we tell our story through a digital presence and personal branding?
Definitely. I mean, we're just in a digital world now, right? Like that's really where all of our stories are going. Then and that's also how we're interacting. And I don't know if it's just because of COVID that we're now, you know, even more so you know, saturated in the digital space because we already can't be together. But I think that's just kind of the trajectory anyways of just how our lives are going. Like, you know, everything is turning digital now. But I think it's a really great platform to tell our stories, and not just to tell our stories, but to reach people. You know, I think being in the digital space now, you know, you're not just confined to networking with people who are in a room with you, right? Because that could be limiting in a sense if there's only like 10 people there. Now, you know, you're sharing stories on different platforms, on different social medias, and reaching people. And again, those stories that you're telling, you don't know. And I mean, hopefully you will know, but sometimes you don't know like the impact it's having, right? Like I can post something on my Twitter and tomorrow it could be trending and be like, what the heck happened? But the story that I'm telling, even in just a few words, has hit a nerve, or has gotten support from a lot of people, from everywhere. And so I think it's a really great place to reach people, and especially if you do have a specific story that you are trying to tell, when it comes to being intentional about it. um, yeah, I think just being on these platforms and being in the digital space is just a great way for reach. And then in terms of personal branding, I mean, I just go, I do that, or I would combine that whole answer to personal branding, because again, your story is your personal brand. There are things that you know that you want to be intentional about. There's a reason why you're telling your stories, right? Like there's something that you want to teach or change or get people to understand or get people to have an action to. And so, when you combine that with that reach, with your intention, and like really thinking about the goals of what your story is going to mean to people, I think just all encompassing, being in this digital presence really is just like such a great way to get that story out.
I would love to dive into the meaty part of this conversation with you to hear your thoughts on what are some steps that people should consider while crafting their story. And I know earlier we emphasized maybe don't pull out a template because you don't want to sound super robotic, but there must be some steps to at least start considering.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say, I mean, just taking time to really know who you are, and again, I start from my story sources is what I call it. So significant events that have shaped you as a person, whatever that is, in your whole lifetime. Is it something when you were a kid? Is it something now as an adult? There's always significant events, big or small, that we all go through that makes us, pivot in life. You know what I mean? Like it could be, getting married. It could be, breaking up with a boyfriend or anything. Like it could be something big or small, but really those significant events, like I always like to start there, because I know any event that happens in my life, I know that I end up pivoting, for good or bad, whatever it is. So really thinking about those story sources is a good place. And story sources, again, can mean significant events. It can mean the people that are in your lives, your family, your friends, mentors, teachers, professors, people that you're just surrounded by, people who support you on a day to day. Those are people that, affect your life, and stories can come from there. Again, your values, I'm going to go back to that. Like whatever you're valuing now as a person, that's a great place to, to really figure out like who you are. And again, that goes back to being really authentic at the end of the day, because whatever it is you're valuing, whatever you're upholding for yourself, that is truly who you are. And can build off of your story. And then yeah, and just really taking a moment to just know who you are. What is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? What have you tried that you're like, I want to continue pursuing that? Or what have you tried and you're like, I'd never want to do that again? What are things that make you happy and are you passionate about? Those really are like the story sources that you can pull from. So that's really the place to really begin. And then from there, it's just figuring out why you're telling your story. Like first off, what story do you want to tell? And then figuring out, why do you even want to tell it? What do you hope to get out of it? But at the same time, what do you hope the person or the audience will walk away with? Like, and that comes down to being authentic and intentional, right? Like you're not just spewing out a story just because, but are you trying to tell a story to entertain? Are you telling a story to teach? Are you telling a story to change something? So really breaking that down. What is your main point? And then from there, just a sequence of events. I just go back down to like the whole foundation of a story is like, a story is a sequence of events that progresses to an ending. Typically it's trying to achieve like maybe like a difficult goal and like the things you did to achieve it. And so really it is just kind of structuring it that way.
I really love that the first part of your answer focused on self awareness and knowing who you are. Like, what is your mission statement and what are your values? Because for me personally, when I have felt the most, I mean, I feel this way every other day probably, but whenever I feel like, what am I doing? Who do I want to present to the world? Like, what story do I want to tell to others essentially about who I am or even to myself? Like, who am I to me? Whenever I question these things, it's because I feel out of tune with my mission statement and my values and what's important to me. And I think I will pull in many like Gen Z millennial folks. Like, I think a lot of folks get tied up in what looks good, like what job roles or companies are trending. What is everyone up to? And if I'm not doing that thing, am I doing something wrong? And I think we get tied up in that. We maybe like lose sight of what's important to us deep down. And then that, like you're saying, it snowballs. And by the time you tell your story, it's inauthentic and we can all tell, which is a harsh thing to hear. But yes, I love this answer.
It's so important to yeah, like love your story, right? And I really mean that. Like again, that's how authenticity feels, is like you put on that story and no one can take it from you. And
Yes.
and I get it. Sometimes yeah, you want to be the story, right? Like you want to have the story that you can tell over and over again. It never changes. You get the same reaction, each time. And I get that because it feels comfortable. But the part of storytelling and why it's such a effective way for us to communicate is because it changes. You know what I mean? I may talk to you tomorrow and say, my whole life just changed, and something happened tonight that flips everything over on its head. You know what I mean? And so like that's something that, again, like you said, yeah, being in tune and like knowing how your story progresses. And even though we are talking about storytelling and like having a story when you network or when you meet someone, a good thing to think about is like it doesn't have to feel like it ends. You know what I mean? Like you can still have an ending in a sense, but you can always, reach out and, feel like, okay, this is not the end of my story. And there's so much more that can like build off of it.
I definitely agree that telling the same story over and over again um, is maybe a sign that it's time for a change and some growth. And a change in story is healthy.
Yes.
It's healthy. Alrighty, Marie. Any last words of wisdom for anyone trying to craft their story?
I love how we're on this whole authenticity thing because I think we really hit the nail on the head for it. Because I know that the word authenticity nowadays gets tossed around a lot, but no one really understands like what that actually means. Like it's almost like saying go and network and no one gives you like, the how to of it. So I feel like that's one thing that I would say is just, yeah, like practice authenticity, practice being comfortable with who you are and not letting companies or other people define your story. Again, I know that we want to have the story, we always want to craft the perfect story, we want it to be ready at all times. But it's okay, it's okay to move things around, switch things around, as you go through your life and as you go through your journey, really picking out what's important to you in your storytelling, and giving yourself time to be okay with it, is super important. And then going off of that, pick storytelling in a way where it's comfortable for you, because again, that again goes back to authenticity, but it really goes back to just, are you happy with that story? Are you happy to tell that story without feeling uncomfortable, without feeling judged, things like that? I think sometimes people may think that, oh, I need to pick the most dramatic part of my life in order to start my story. But it's like, if you're not comfortable with that, don't do it. Don't pick it. Like I know I've had some traumatic things in my life that define who I am, but I pick and choose when I will tell that because it depends on who I'm with, it depends on the setting. And so, again, like, really thinking about what you're comfortable sharing is super important. So, if you want to build out your story and you're not ready to add some details to it and you want to take it out or whatever, that's totally okay. No one's forcing you to tell the things that you don't want to tell. Even if it did impact your life, like, you can still keep things, behind the scenes, and you can share whatever you want. I would say definitely being confident, always helps when you're storytelling. But that's the thing. Like, when you're already telling your story and you're happy with your story and you love your own story, that will naturally come out. Again, like, I can,
Mhm.
I've had many times where, like, I know someone's, a big video game fan, right? I work for a gaming company, and I just ask the question, tell me about your favorite video game. And they just light up in the room and they just start talking and they're like super excited. Like, that's what that's about. That's that confidence that comes in. And the last thing, it's something that you told me, Maria, when we first talked, when we were talking about our blogs and whatnot. And I was telling you how, I'm not really sure how I feel about sharing my blog. Like, I'm a little scared about doing that. Like, I don't know how the content's going to fly. I'm worried about kind of the external factors of, like, when this blog goes out. And you messaged me on LinkedIn and you said, the only thing that matters is that at the end of the day, I'm the one that loves my content. And that has stuck with me since our conversation. And I think that really, like, is my probably my last tip for building out your story is, whatever your content is, like, you should be the only one who's happy about it and not worry about, how other people can take it. And of course, people will react the way they want to react. But knowing at the end of the day that I told a story that is personal to me, that's something that I'm passionate about, something that I know I hold dear, and no one can change that and change my mind about it, that's super powerful. And so I think, just coming off of what you told me, like, I would say, like, the same thing to anyone who's trying to craft their story is, like, when it comes down to that content, whatever it is, make sure that you're the only one who's happy about it.
Awesome. Well, I'm very flattered, first of all. Thank you for that. I'm glad that stuck with you. And thank you for that answer. Super, super helpful thoughts, food for thought for people to think about after they listen to this episode. And thank you so much for joining us, Marie. It was great chatting with you as always.
Thank you so much. It was awesome to chat about this. And yes, hopefully, you're all ready to share your stories soon in the future.
Yes, I think everyone will be after listening to this episode for sure. And to anyone tuning in, thank you for joining us. As always, at Opal, we shine brighter together, and we'll see you next time.